And in the studio with me, Adam Ambrogi. He is the program director with the Democracy Fund, program director for elections. Democracyfund.org is the website. You can tweet him at democracyfund, F-U-N-D. And are we having fun with our democracy?
It's been a crazy, crazy couple of months, Tom. So, but we're almost at the end of it, right?
Yeah. So Donald Trump is running around going, the election's rigged. He's got his surrogates out. I saw Rudy Giuliani the weekend before last talking about there was these busloads of those people. I'm assuming he was talking about either Hispanics or African Americans. I'm not sure which of those people Rudy was referring to. Who were voting. They were tracking them, and on the 8th or 9th polling place that they went to vote over and over and over again, somehow magically Rudy stopped them, but never bothered to arrest them or put them in jail. It sounds to me like a lie. Frankly, I don't know a better word for it. But this whole thing, you know, the election's rigged. What say you to that?
Right. I think that there's a lot of concern, and folks don't quite understand how to unpack this issue. The term that the election's rigged, that this is some sort of big conspiracy, is really, I don't think, much more than political grandstanding. And you really do see this pushback from election officials across the country, and including secretaries of state, those that run elections in the state. Most of them are actually Republican, that have stood up and said, listen, you know, there is no grand conspiracy to rig the election. The election that we have is sound and secure. Wrapped up in this claim, obviously, is also the subtext that the election is vulnerable by being hacked, by either attempts to go after statewide voter registration systems or actually hack vote counting systems on Election Day. And there are reasons why both of those things really are not as applicable as I think the media has made it out to be.
Isn't Alaska voting electronically? I mean, over the internet?
Some states have systems by which they accept return ballots for a very small segment of the population, the military and overseas vote population. The vast majority of states have a paper, voter-verified paper backup system of which you can audit after the election, and it's what they use at times to sort of check to make sure that
Georgia doesn't. Georgia's 100% machines with no paper trail that are more than a decade old.
Right.
And I mean, people have been raising questions about the Georgia ever since the polls were showing that Sonny Perdue was 2 points down and he won but 2 points up. And that kind of happened right across the whole GOP thing back in whatever year that was, 2004, 2006, I forget. But it seems to me that there is actually something to this. In Florida, this is not a secret. I mean, the BBC was reporting the day after the election of 2000, was reporting that Catherine Harris, the Secretary of State of Florida, at the request of the brother of the man running for president, Jeb Bush, George Bush was running for president, had obtained a list of felons from Texas. And there tend to be fairly common names among ethnic groups, among Asians, Lee, Kim, things like that, among African Americans, 80 or 90%, Greg Powell said on this program, I think, of all people whose last name is Washington are African Americans, 60-some-odd% Jackson, et cetera. And that some 40,000, some have put the number as high as 90,000, some have put it as low as 16,000. But the ACLU, in my recollection, is the lawsuit was 40-some-odd thousand African Americans were thrown off the voting rolls in Florida in the 3 weeks before the election, which, had that not happened, Al Gore would certainly have won Florida in 2000 and would have been president. Is that not election fraud?
I think that there have been concerns about list matching related to the voter registration list. We've made a huge amount of progress, though, since 2000.
But Chris Kobach is running this operation out of Kansas, the interstate cross-check that's being used by just slightly fewer than 30 states now, where they're taking people who they're ignoring their middle names. And, you know, Christina Hernandez was the example Greg Pallas is using in his movie. I'm guessing you've seen this, you're familiar with this. There's a Christina Hernandez in Louisiana whose middle name is Maria. There's a Christina Hernandez in New Jersey whose middle name is something else, Jocelyn or something. Right. And according to Chris Kobach, according to the Secretary of State of Kansas, who's providing these lists to all these Republican AGs, or Secretaries of State, rather, these are the same person. Right. And they're both committing a felony. They're both committing voter fraud. So they both need to be knocked off the ballot. But we're not going to arrest them because then we might discover that they're not actually the same person. Millions of people are being disenfranchised this way. How is that not newsworthy? How is it that the media is not saying, you know, okay, Donald Trump, we're not seeing any evidence of people showing up who are not citizens to vote. Right. And we're seeing very little evidence of people who are felons showing up to vote in states where it's illegal. That's the principal, quote, voter fraud. It's accidental. Right. People don't realize this is the law. But what the hell about, you know, what's going on with these literally millions of people that the Republicans are trying to push off the voting rolls?
I think the good news story related to this is there are a lot of concerns about being over or under inclusive related to these matches. Many of the states that participate in that Kansas cross-check you reference also participate in this ERIC system. This was created by the Pew Charitable Trust. And the ERIC system takes into account a lot of those middle name, last name, unique identifiers. It does a really robust way of making sure that it compares the statewide registration list to the statewide DMVs. And the unique thing about the ERIC program for states that have it, about 21 states and jurisdictions have it, some that also use the cross-check, is that not only does it make sure that the folks are in the state appropriately and are eligible, registered and eligible voters, it finds out those folks that are potentially eligible, over 18, citizens, et cetera, and does affirmative outreach to them. And so, I mean, for the first time over the last couple of years, we've had millions of voters that have gotten a letter from their state, which includes a statewide voter registration form saying, you know, we see that you're eligible. You are not on our list. Please engage with us. And so that's one of the good news pieces there.
Partisanized. I mean, are any one of those 20-plus states that are using that ERIC system run with a Republican governor, Republican legislature, and Republican Secretary of State?
They've kept it about half and half. There are a number of states that I think around 11 to 12 of those states that use the ERIC system are Republican controlled, because it does do a decent job of balancing the access and integrity of the system. You make sure that people aren't, you don't want people voting accidentally in New York and Florida. It's almost never done intentionally, but you don't want it to happen even accidentally. And then you also want to pair it with that outreach to say, listen, you know, we see that you live and you have a driver's license in state X. You're not registered to vote. How about you do that? How about you finish that in? And so some of the concerns that we've had with the rigging and hacking claims is that there are systems to prevent against some of these attempts. And if we're afraid that if people hear this message that there's rigging and that there's hacking involved, the voters on the bubble are going to say, well, what does it matter that I show up and vote? We want to make sure.
That's the message I've been hearing from Democrats since 2000. You know, it's since Bev Harris first started raising this issue in 2002, and when Help America Vote Act came along and all this stuff. And the pushback from the official Democratic Party has been, don't talk about this because people will get discouraged and they won't go out to vote. Right. But on the Republican side, they are talking about it. They're talking about it loudly. They're yelling and screaming about it. And it seems to be actually energizing the base. It's pissing people off, and they're saying, you know, damn it, I'm going to go out there and vote. Right. I don't understand why the Democrats are unwilling to talk about Republican, what I think are naked attempts to modify the profile of the electorate, to make it harder for you know, with these voter suppression ID laws, to make it harder for young people to vote, urban dwellers to vote, people who live in cities where they don't drive, they don't own a car, old people who no longer have a driver's license. You know, I mean, you know, North Carolina, as the what was it, the Fifth Circuit Court pointed out, or the Fourth Circuit, whichever court is North Carolina, they said that, and they've got the documentation where the North Carolina politicos went to a group of consultants and said, what are the differences in voting behavior between white people and African Americans? Right. And they came back with a list. Here's the things African Americans do. They're more likely to vote on weekends. They're more likely to vote on Sundays. They're more likely to make use of early voting. Right. And so they literally went through that list and made all those things illegal. The court said this was done with surgical precision, was the phrase of the court. Shouldn't we be raising hell about this?
I think that folks should be raising hell about these issues. What I'm concerned about is that we need, as you mentioned, this issue is about elections and election administration is far too political. We have to figure out those ways that we can ratchet down the attention on both sides so that people don't think every time that there's a Democratic Secretary of State that everything's well and good and that the voting rights are being protected across the state, because it's not always, and that every time there's a Republican Secretary of State in certain circles, it's viewed as a net negative. I think that that's one of the things related to some of the benefits we've seen coming out of this presidential commission, Obama's lawyer and Governor Romney's lawyer getting together and trying to promote early voting over time, trying to promote registration modernization over time, better quality of election officials. I mean, Connecticut, since 2012, has an entire system of education that all the election officials in the state are required to go through that didn't exist before, because there's been a new and renewed focus to say, listen, we should make this as nonpartisan as possible. We should give people the skills and abilities to run systems so that it's a voter-centric way of serving elections.
But how do you do that in Louisiana or Alabama or Kansas or some of these retrograde states, at least run by, I mean, they're still dancing to Paul Weyrick's tune, in 1980 when he told that group of, when he was running the Reagan campaign, and he told a group of activists, I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by the majority of people. They never have been in our history. In fact, quite candidly, our influence in the elections goes up as the voting populace goes down. I mean, that's a verbatim quote from the guy who was the co-founder of ALEC, which has introduced, these election suppression bills into over 20 states.
Right. I think we need to definitely push back against changing the election rules to benefit a segment of the population. But I will say there have been positive
automatic voter registration. You turn 18, you're a voter.
It's something that is being experimented with in Oregon and may be implemented very soon in California. I think it's something that's interesting. It's worth looking at. We also have to think about how it impacts primaries, because you can't be automatically registered as a D or an R. And so there are things we need to figure out from the process side of things. I will say you see some potentially surprising heroes. Thom Shedler, who's the Secretary of State of Louisiana, has actually done an amazing job about using new technology to promote registration within the state. He goes out and does GOT events across the board. And actually, for Louisiana, they have a new Go Vote, GEAUX, the sort of Louisiana Go Vote app that they really promote in communities across the country. They are a member of this ERIC program that really did outreach across the state. And so while there's clearly more work that needs to be done, we need to get through this election, figure out where there are vulnerabilities, and really start to work on them in the longer term.
There's some good signs.
Yeah, no, there's a positive news there.
Okay.
So.
Adam Ambrogi, he's the Program Director for Elections at the Democracy Fund. You can find their website at democracyfund.org. You can tweet them at Democracy Fund. Adam, thanks for being with us today. We'll be right back.